Hello and welcome to Film Ireland Presents. I'm Gemma Creagh and today I'll be chatting with Chris Brennan. Chris is an accomplished filmmaker, screenwriter and marketing specialist. Plus, he's the creative mind behind writingchops.io. Thanks so much for chatting with us, Chris.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
It's great to have you here. We've known each other a long time through Filmbase, but you're up to something really, really exciting at the moment. So we'll delve into kind of the great insights and background of what you can do for people and for writers. But first, I would really like to chat to you about your own journey. How did you get into filmmaking? How did then that translate into marketing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, as you say, we met through Filmbase and I went to film school, but to bring it all the way back, I'm actually originally from Fairbanks, Alaska. And then I moved to Bundoran, Donegal, and then I found myself in Dublin. So, as you can imagine, that topic that dominates most conversations I have. Like I ended up having this script where someone goes, "Where are you from?" And I'm like, "Okay, let me perform this for you guys." Yeah, so then around 2008 or so, I got into filmmaking. I entered film school for the first year, and I absolutely fell in love with it. Like immediately, it's one of those moments where you'll hear from a lot of people where they finally found the thing that they're meant to do. That was definitely for me. And I remember going into year one film and media DVS, and I was like, "Oh, I can't wait to like make the short film. Maybe I'll get selected." And I was told right away, "Oh, we're not making a film this year. That's year two." I was like, "What?" I was like, "Okay." So my ever stubborn self, I went to Cons Camera and started renting equipment, and I just made my own short film in year one anyway. And I think I pretty much shot the entire thing twice because I made so many blunders and mistakes. And I was just like, no, I actually have to finish this. I can't go anywhere unless I actually finish this film. And funny enough, the film was called The Hangover, and that coincided with the actual Hollywood Todd Phillips film. So I'm going around chatting to people about it. Then this Dublin bus drives by with the poster, and my friends were like, "No, that's not." I'm like, "No, no, it's not. That is not the film." So that was like my really early time getting into filmmaking, and I think I learned so much from having the educational system, but then also on the other side, just getting my hands dirty and like learning from my mistakes and taking risks and figuring it out and making as many mistakes as I can early on. That was like my very early start when I got into filmmaking.
And just out of interest, what age were you when you moved to Donegal? Because I just think it's interesting to see where in your development process did you have that shift because it's a big cultural difference.
Oh, for sure. I was 16 years old. So my brother, who's 2 years older than me, finished high school. And my parents, who are both Irish, they went, "Okay, brother is finished. He's 18. He's finished with high school. We have no reason to be here." I'm going, "Well, like I have 2 years left, and it's going to be a big transition." So they moved me to like they moved all of us, not just me. They moved all of us to Donegal, where I ended up in a school in Sligo, and it was an all boys school, and I had to wear a uniform. And now I'm 16. I'm coming from an American school system that's mixed, and you wear whatever you want. And this is the year 2000, so Eminem, Dr. Dre, it's very the rise of the hip hop culture. So that's kind of the clothing that we'd wear. And it was a complete shock for me. It took me 6 months until I found a mixed gender school and I orchestrated my own transfer because I was like, "I can't, guys, come on, this is too much. I can't do that dynamic at 16 for 2 years." So yeah, 100%. It was a huge cultural impact for me as an individual.
That yeah, because I just think that like because it does kind of shape your perspective, and I do think like as a writer, as someone who observes, and it gives you kind of perspective that you would be able to see things that maybe people who've lived there their whole lives don't. Like the fact that you're like, this system is ridiculous. Like we've all been, or like I would say the vast majority of us went to single sex schools where you're infantilized and have to wear ridiculous uniforms that are not weather appropriate. And like they're having that outsider view. Do you think that shaped your vision of wanting to be a writer, or do you think it helped you in any way?
I think it absolutely helped. I think a lot of elements in my timeline really helped. Like I got into filmmaking at a later age than most people. Well, I guess imagine if you finish high school or the equivalency of it, second year, then you'd probably go to college. I actually did that, then got into marketing and then dropped out. And then it was in my mid 20s that I got into filmmaking. And I 100% think that the multicultural perspective that I've developed in just my own experience absolutely impacted me because I have experience from the American, especially the unique Alaskan side of things with Irish parents, and then lived from 16 to um, I forget what 35 or so when I moved to Berlin, Germany, which I where I reside now. All of that kind of collision of culture, also had that feeling of being a bit of an outsider, and constantly moving. So after Donegal, I moved to Dublin. I worked in bars then, so you'd kind of develop these pocket communities of friend family dynamics with people from all around the world. So like if you've ever been a bartender or you know bartenders, you probably know that their community are like it's somebody and then their group are like a Polish person, an Italian, like a Brazilian, and you have this complete global perspective and culture, and you'd actually end up having like a Christmas where you're involving everybody around you together. So once it came into actually becoming a filmmaker, I took all of that experience and all those different cultures and kind of that became this more global perspective that I've always wanted to create. I love the authenticity of moments, but I also always want to think like, can I make this as universal as possible so as many people can understand the message or even resonate with the message. So I think all of those things absolutely uh, collided together when it came down to sitting down and going, what's the story I want to tell? And then just digging into my background and going, okay, there's a lot there.
And in terms of, okay, so you graduated your degree. What then? What was your kind of journey then? Did you go, okay, well, this is exact I want to be, was it always like I want to be a screenwriter? Or were you just kind of drawn to the field of film and found your way?
No, it actually, I never really thought of it until my mid 20s. And it was actually in 2008, my mother died.
I'm
And
so
when that
sorry.
happened, I made a list of the things I wanted to do for myself. I guess you sometimes you can become introspective. And funny enough, on the top of that list was make a film. And I just was surprised as anybody who knew me about that. And then a few months later, I was in film school. And that's when it just hooked in. And I was just like, I don't know. Like at that point, I was bartending. I guess I was a bit goalless. And the conversations of lemons and limes and stock orders, like I was just empty with that. I was like, I need something else. And the making of film, screenwriting, that kind of artistic creative side, the very project management and collaborative energy really came into full force. And then it kind of resonated beyond that as well because I started doing like a self-published children's book, or I would do live events and I would do podcasts. But I also realized across all of those elements, it was artistic, it was creative, but it was collaborative. So there was something about the collaborative medium that always drew me. Whereas I've never written a novel on my own. I've never just sat down and went, this is a singular work that I will take from beginning to end. I think there's always needs to be where can I kind of collaborate with somebody or I can engage with other creative people and share this experience for the output of an audience. And it was over time I realized there's a consistency with everything I creatively choose, and it's usually involving other people.
And can I take you back a little bit to, in terms of, okay, the filmmaking is the process,
Yeah.
but the goal is storytelling, and that will like tie into marketing because I mean that is part of it. But I'm just, and if it's okay to ask this, I went through something very similar, but loss at that age, that profound loss, does change trajectory. And like you were saying, it does in a practical sense where you're like, what do you want to do? But I think more importantly, did it change what you wanted to say?
Well, I guess it's different. It's difficult because I didn't have much before that I wanted to say. It was actually only after that experience that I feel like there was something missing in my life that I wanted to kind of point my direction towards. I was kind of living week to week up until that point, like if you wash up on a Thursday with a new fresh paycheck, that's pretty good. I did a good job. Yeah, up until then, and then that wasn't sufficient enough. I needed to, I guess in a way it was justify the death rather than celebrate the life. It's like, what if I could take this really impactful moment and make something out of it? And I think that's kind of a motivating factor that I had. And that also has kind of revealed itself within themes of my work, which I have noticed. I didn't mean for it to happen, but when I would review stuff, I would go, there it is again. I'm like, wow, I kind of circled back to that exact topic. I was like, I didn't know it. Sometimes I wanted to fight the fact that it would unearth, but it just kind of shows up. And I was like, okay, all right, well, you can't fight those too much, you
I
know?
do. I think part of the process, or why we write and why we create these worlds and myth and metaphor and explanation and sharing concepts and ideas and feelings, and it's a method for communicating it, but it is interesting in the types of stories and how you find what it is that is important enough to say.
Yeah.
So I'm just checking, like, do you notice now again that you're retrospectively looking at things differently, or does that impact the work that you like to create and like to work on?
I think it's been so long since then that I think it's just I've adapted a philosophy or a writing style that is just
Yeah.
natural. I don't think of it. It just kind of comes from the idea. And maybe what we'll get into in a little bit with the
Yeah.
marketing side of things is I'm very, very audience focused. And I
Yeah.
enter back into a world time and time again where the creators talk about like it's for their benefit that they create. And I just completely disagree. I think that there's a recipient for this, and I want to make sure that they are looked after in my
Yeah.
process. So I've become very audience oriented, and I want to know who's it for, how will they enjoy it? Because I don't know, like again, if it was an individual activity where I was painting and I just had paintbrushes and some paint and then a canvas, that's a very singular process. But what we do is collaborative in nature. So you're going to have other people's input. And then there is a recipient at the end of it, never mind the amount of funding that you require from other people. So there's a ton of pressure and a responsibility. And I've always felt uncomfortable when people just go, it's not for the audience, it's for me. I'm like, you could do another art form if it's just for you. I think this does require a certain point of view that is audience oriented. So the marketing side of me 100% kind of pushed me more towards that. But I think I've always had that in me where I'm always, even when you tell a story, some people enjoy the telling of the story. Then there's some people who enjoy the reaction to the story. And I've always been somebody who's like, I hope this lands exactly how I hope it does. I've always wanted that reaction. Yeah.
But again, what I'm trying to dig down into is like I think it's a collaboration between you, the filmmaker, like you, the writer, all the actors, and finding the emotional truth of anything. Of like it could be like a zombie horror film, but without authenticity and emotion underneath, like underpinning it. It's just pretty pictures on a page, and it's kind of it's honing the message, but honing the whole emotion and shared experience that kind of underpins everything, like the depth and the wealth of it. So I like basically it's I completely understand what you're saying about the audience experience. If you're not giving it, but I do think you have to give something of yourself to create that. And I'm just wondering, how have you found that in your journey in creating stories that people resonate with, in building characters? Do you put much of yourself into each one?
I think it naturally happens. There's a couple of schools of thought with this, and I think I've always been a person who lets the theme emerge naturally. I think that there's a very modern approach where you start with a theme and you kind of build around it. I don't believe in that. I think that sometimes a theme emerges that I'm like, oh, I didn't want to say this. It's there, so I'll just have to let it continue. But I think it does show up, and maybe it's a confidence or a comfortability with letting it happen, and maybe it's a an experience thing where it's like I really want to make sure that this project has a reason to exist, and I'll attach that reason with a critical message for society or culture or the future. Or when you kind of have done this enough, you go, it'll show up. Usually it emerges. And if it doesn't emerge, then this is probably not the right project, but it will emerge. And then I'll follow that. And after you've put the work in and the message or that theme or that dynamic or that personal element of yourself emerges, that's usually what keeps you there continuing, where you go, this is a story worth telling. I just don't normally begin with that. I just kind of begin with an interesting character, idea, notion, scene, whatever. It's so difficult to describe where an idea comes from, but I just know if I keep going back to it and then there is some kind of emotional connection that like reveals itself, then I think it's worth it. But I don't think I've ever went into something going, this is what I mean to say. I'm not built that way. Maybe it works for other people. It's never been that for me.
Yeah, it's all part of your process. But I just think that's just really interesting to how the creative process then unfurls into, like you as a person and the work that you do. So, like, let's continue on the journey. So, you finished your film school. What was it then? Like, I often think there's a moment when you're kind of like in something that has a very clear set of goals, and then you kind of go out into the real world that it's sort of shocking. It's like a jarring experience because you're protected, you're working towards something, and then all of a sudden it's like this is it. Where do you go? There's no clear route, and that can be a jarring moment. But do you find because you were in your mid-20s there, you had more direction stepping out?
Yeah, and I was learning lessons really early on, and that actually helped me eventually whenever I moved into a career in marketing because I found that there was already some networking abilities that I was finding and cultivating, and one of them was even in DBS, even in my first few years in film school, like I Alaskan Irish background from like my dad was on the pipeline, like I have no connection to the industry. So I started trying to see if I could use the film school and the experts they bring in, and maybe I can foster relationships with them so they would bring me on a film set. Like early on, my second year, I bought a camera, and the idea for buying a camera was if you want to be invited to a party, why don't you become the DJ? And I was like, if I'm needed, if I have something that they need, maybe they'll bring me on. And that totally worked. So when I finished the first my media degree, my film and media degree, they were just launching the film-based master's program for feature film production, and I was selected from my my film and degree course immediately to be interviewed for that. So it was one of those things where I put it out in the world. I literally spoke to the lecturers about my interest. I think they saw in me this drive and motivation.
And you were always so good at pitching. Like I will remember this. I was like, you had like seven different pitches. You could just pull them out of a bag, like have them be so natural. I was quite jealous of that because I'm still atrocious.
I think there's always just a passion there, and you can say like I've got the drive, but I think it's in the action. Again, like they said we're not making a film in year one, so I made a film, and then year two I was selected to be the director. I wrote the script, and
The light of day gives the premise.
oh,
It's
so
hilarious.
that's the feature that I wrote later
Yeah.
on. What I'm talking
Oh,
about is
yeah.
is the short film I did in film school, which was The Living Statue, which was I would walk down the street and I would see that there was these people pretending to be statues, and I thought, wouldn't it be a nice short film to have like a territorial feud between statues, and eventually that leads to a standoff where two statues have basically a staring contest. And so that was selected, and I moved on. But eventually, I was kind of saying at near the end of the degree, I was like, okay, so what's next? What's next? And when you put yourself out there and you let people know very specifically what you're interested in, that came back in the form of Connor Murphy telling me they have his new initiative coming that year, and he wants me to interview for it. So I interviewed for it, I got in, and that was the one of the best experiences I had because it gave me a complete trajectory into this new pioneering course where in that film-based course, three people would be selected to be co-directors of a feature film. And I don't believe they actually intended for me to be one of them. So I had to like work extra hard and to change their mind for maybe a preconceived notion of who they believe. And then I ended up being selected as one of the directors, which was a impactful moment for me. And then the whole time I'm listening to like podcasts and learning as much as I can about filmmaking. And I always remembered that there was this one quote from Christopher Nolan about film festivals, how most people, if they bring a film to a film festival, they're promoting that film, whereas you should be promoting your next one. So when I had the opportunity to co-direct Keys to the City for Filmbase, and then it premiered at the Galway Film Festival, I already had The Light of Day, a feature script ready to go, and I was promoting that. I even planted the question in the audience at the premiere of The Keys to the City, and that's another trick even in marketing that I've utilized, whereas like you can control these dynamics as much as you think you can. So if there's a Q&A, I'm like, hey, went to a friend, ask the question, so what's next, guys? So that I can frame my response and then invite people to learn more about my new project. I'm like, this is a celebration of what we just did, taking what I learned from this advice I heard on a podcast or wherever that was. I looked around and went, yeah, actually, I do have a project. And immediately I was starting to see the mechanisms of communication and branding and networking in place if you kind of strategize it a bit more. But yeah, that film base basically gave me the entire rocket ship of an opportunity. Without that, I think it'd be different. Because even in then, they would bring in even more experts, and every single time someone would come in, I would wait after class and just try to see if I can engage with them. But I wouldn't want to ask for help. That was my thing. I was like, is there something I can give them? Is there some value I can bring to them? Because I don't want to be somebody who's just like, I need help. It's like maybe I can add value to them, and I kept engaging that way, and it started to resonate from what my perspective was anyway. I think people started recognizing that, and I think it was a big lesson I learned early on, which was if everyone's out there going, "Can you read my script?" Maybe I should be the one who's like, "How can I help you with your project or goals?" And I think that just that messaging has translated better, and it made me stand out more because I wasn't somebody who was in need of help. And that basically gave me a lot of the foundation I needed for the next steps out of the educational sector. But that educational sector was incredible. It gave me everything I needed where I had no connection to anybody at all before that.
A writing credit on a feature film that was produced and distributed and hit festivals and had was successfully received, and a directing credit on a different feature film. So I was like, actually, that's that's quite good. That's not a
That
bad.
was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a beautiful thing too. So that project I was pitching at the time after Keys of the City was The Light of Day, which when I wrote it, it was a found footage film about a found footage film.
Yeah, that's the premise that I love. Yeah.
It was a group of inept filmmakers trying to make a found footage vampire film. So think of it as Ed Wood meets Spinal Tap. And it actually was based on some of my own experience working on film sets. And I thought there was so much hilarity and human moments and kind of tenderness and these connections. I was like, oh, this is like, there's so much you can cultivate from this while playing with the strengths of storytelling and narrative structure. And so I wrote the script. Um, and this is another thing I learned too within the process, whereas I learned the importance of having a developed relationship with people because I really believe that impacts how they perceive your work. So when I would give my script to somebody, they would say, "This is incredible. This is so funny." I give it to somebody else and they say, "You don't know how to write. I'll recommend some books on how to write." And I was literally in the same week. I'm like, how is this a thing? How does somebody really it resonates with and they totally get it, and somebody is offering me titles for books on how to write because I have no clue of writing. And that was a thing while I was trying to sell The Light of Day that I kept running into. I would work with a production company, the development executive, the person reading would love it. The producer would say, "I don't really get it, but she really likes it." I was like, wow. Eventually, the person who bought it was Alan from Filmbase, and that was the person who I had a relationship with who really loved it. And I was like, I wonder how important it is to that these relationships are with how people um engage or receive this work. Like if you're sending something cold, somebody might read it begrudgingly. But if they were interested in you, then maybe they'll read it with a bit more of a positive mindset. And there's no way of knowing, but I've always felt like any time I've had that pre-existing relationship or I've cultivated a industry relationship professionally, then the work would always land better rather than me going, "Can you read my script?" And if I finally get someone to read it, they just tell me what they didn't like. I was like, I think there's something to this industry where I should focus on developing true, transparent, professional relationships as much as writing the scripts. And I feel like that's a thing that we all need to learn in general.
It would be the first thing that I would recommend anyone do. Like, and I think that's why, people that have a network that maybe have friends or family in the industry survive so much more because like that as well, it's so competitive. You like feedback is so subjective. It's very easy to be completely torn down by it. But then again, instead of seeing the note behind the note or the process behind the process or going actually, like it isn't me, it's just something that isn't there for them. And the way to do that is to speak their language or put something that resonates with them into it because like it is so subjective. And yeah, people can read something in 1,000 different ways. So what was your process then when okay, the light of day hit? Did that's someone that did really well on the festival circuit? Very funny, very received. I saw it in the cinema and everyone was laughing their butts off.
That was such an experience. Oh my gosh. That was like Keys to the City was an amazing thing to co-direct this feature film. Like it was a big milestone. I think it hits a little differently when it was your idea that you wrote. Like these are ideas that I had in my head, and to get it all the way to a sold out crowd in Galway Film Fest and Galway Film Fleadh, I was like, whoa, I'm there with my wife, my friends, like strangers, filmmakers, and everyone's laughing. Now they're laughing at things I didn't expect them to laugh at. They're laughing at things I didn't write because the improv was really well too. And then they're laughing at like they're not laughing at things I was like, this is a sure winner. But either like it's an enjoyable, unique experience. But that one was very like awe-inspiring. I was just sitting there going, I cannot believe it got to this level. Like this is so it's so difficult to get it, and here I am now watching it on screen. And again, it's if you want to be a painter, paint on a canvas. This took so many people to get it to this stage where we're all watching it together. I'll never forget it. It was such an important moment that still resonates fondly for me.
So then what like where did the sidestep to marketing? Again, this is the thing where I think all genres, all forms of creativity are about communication and marketing leans into that. But how did you sidestep then to marketing? And again, what was interesting is you mentioned before that you had started that and left it. So there was obviously something that was kind of drawing you to that as well. Can you just
Yeah, I think when I was in school in Ireland in Donegal, yeah, it was. I think I misunderstood the what is it, the CES? I think
let's
that's
say,
what it's
oh
called.
yeah.
So yeah. And then they just gave me marketing. I was like, oh, okay. I put that as one of a list of things. I just don't think I was ready for that. I think what I needed actually was that life experience and bar work and going out on my own, paying rent, experiencing things. That 100% helped me as a writer, by the way. And I actually recommend doing that kind of work for writers, actors, creatives. Sometimes when people talk about uh, like the military service used to be mandatory. I think public service should be mandatory. I think going off and becoming a waiter, a bartender, and getting that experience, it's healthy for you. You should kind of get into that work. But as a creative, as a director, as a writer, as an actor, I think it's so amazing because you really understand dynamics, cultures, personalities, how you engage with it. You can always tap into those experiences when you write. So like it was so important early on in my development. But then I got ended up getting into filmmaking. Went to film school. That's where my passion was. But what people can probably all resonate with, it's very difficult to make a full-time career out of filmmaking, out of screenwriting. I needed something more consistent, especially when I wanted to start a family. And even though I did find success in filmmaking, it wasn't enough. I was still working in a bar. I needed to move on from that. So filmmaking and videography are very close bedfellows, and I know a lot of filmmakers who do that. But I guess my difference was I didn't want to become, I started as like my Chris Brennan videography. Then I realized maybe I should do this for one company and basically become their in-house studio. So that's kind of how I approached it. I started working for a video production company, started dipping my toe more in content than just videography. And that's how the ball started to roll. And that's when I actually found that, funny enough, I was actually pretty decent at marketing. Now, I talked my way into marketing. I had nothing that said marketing. I did a 5-day boot camp for a marketing certificate to put it onto my CV because I realized a film and media and feature film production credits are like degrees and masters doesn't resonate with marketers, so or people looking for marketers. So I did a 5-day boot camp. And before I did the boot camp, I put that on my CV that I did it. Even my wife is like, but you haven't done it yet. I was like, yeah, but by the time I have the interview, I probably would have done it. And then I started the 5-day boot camp. By day 3, I had to skip the third day because I had an interview for an internship that I got hired for on the Friday. I was like, my CV needed to have the keyword marketing on it. And from there, I talked my way into it. I did an internship for like 4 months, 3 months, and I was constantly hitting them up going, is this going to turn into a full-time position? I want this to be a full-time position. Again, I think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that transition into film base. Just telling people very clearly what your goal is actually can help. So eventually they said, yes, this will become a full-time position. If but the pay was like minuscule, like it was nothing. So I convinced them to say, hey, could I put it on my CV that I've been here a year? And if somebody asks you, would you say yes? And they said, yeah. And a month later, I had a full-time job. And they went, we now see what your angle was. And they couldn't be mad. They actually kind of appreciated the hustle. I was like,
I
look, I
mean,
think I can do it. I can do
yeah,
it.
but that's so clear that what that angle was. That's
Yeah.
yeah,
I don't know.
that's great. That
So I
yeah,
got into marketing. And yeah,
you marketed
absolutely.
your way into marketing.
That was it. I was like, hey, look, I kind of convinced people that I can do this. And then I started seeing results from the efforts and my ideation. And I really got into actual marketing, like the communication of it, how to structure your communication professionally and target it as well. And of course, that does have benefits as a screenwriter, but it really more helped me as a career filmmaker, as a career screenwriter, because what I started to notice was the strategies, tips, tactics, tools, and best practices that I was learning and implementing in the business, startup, entrepreneurial, marketing side, I could totally translate into the screenwriter filmmaking world. And in fact, none of these tactics, tips, best practices, tools have ever even been utilized on this side. So I just immediately saw this amazing niche and opportunity for taking branding, professional communication, and marketing and applying it to an industry that I was just never introduced to. That was for my benefit as a career, for my benefit in my career, but
Yeah.
eventually then helping other people learn these tactics as well.
And you've been working in marketing in that role that you're working in now for how long? So, like, and do you find that things have changed as technology and social media has grown over that time?
Yeah, so it's like over 10 years now I've been doing this. And 100% it always changes. I think that's actually part of the exciting element of marketing. It may not be for everybody if they like a system that they can control and it will be there for 10 years. For us in marketing, it's always going to change. You're always A/B testing. You're always being introduced to new technology. It may not be right. It may be right, but the only way to learn is to test. It teaches you everything, even like you can't be afraid of mistakes. Yeah, I have to teach this to entrepreneurs and startup founders constantly because they go into this and a lot of times they misunderstand what marketing is. And marketing is about failure because the concept of A/B testing is you have to find out what doesn't work as much as find out what does work. So if you're going into this and you're hoping that it's always going to succeed, that's the wrong mindset. You actually have to be open to experiment, open to try new tactics, communications, and approaches, and then analyze the results to see what what registered with your target audience. And so much of that stuff has been super beneficial, but it's always exciting. I will admit sometimes it does get exhausting where I'm like, oh God, they've changed the dashboard again, or they've introduced a new platform. I'm not sure I really want to learn another one, but that's the gig. That is the gig. You always have to keep swimming with marketing.
So you're working on something very exciting at the moment. I was wondering if you could tell us about that.
So yeah, basically, as those years went on, and I was continuously working in filmmaking, screenwriting, I was being hired by a couple of producers to write their projects. Then they're in various forms of development. I was continuously working full time in marketing. And then I would go to film festivals, networking events with screenwriters, and I would just chat to people individually. And when they would talk about the difficulties they were facing, I would just tell them little tips and tricks I learned in marketing. And eventually I realized that, what's missing in this entire industry is a dedicated resource that teaches marketing, branding, professional communication. And then I had the next thought, I think I actually have to be the one to do it because there's nobody else doing it. And I went through film and media degrees. I've done the master's course. I've attended webinars, seminars, conferences, and they never talk about this. In fact, I've been to so many of these things where producers, distributors, streaming executives, managers, agents, they tell you that there's three things you need to know. You have like three things you need. You need to have a great voice. You need to have the right connections, and you need to have material that you've created to showcase your efforts. But they'd never get into how to get to know people. They would just jump straight into how to write, which is three-act structure, hero's journey, the character arc. And I'll sit there going, wow, we just never get into how do you network? How do you negotiate? They talk about pitching, which is important, but you actually have to communicate a lot and leverage relationships to even get to that point, besides just cold pitching to somebody at an event. So basically, I realized that I should actually start using my experience and bringing this to screenwriters, filmmakers, and creative professionals and teach them best practices that we learned in the foundations of marketing, but tailor it for our industry for the very first time. So that's what I've started doing in the past year and a half now. And so far, the reactions have been just so valuable, like so endearing. Like I've loved the effort that I put in and the reactions that I get, and it only makes me want to continue doing this more and more because I just think it's such an important topic that up until now has never actually been discussed or even provided to this audience.
And tell me, so you know what works, you know the processes to figure out how best to get yourself out there. What are the biggest issues that people do, or the kind of big mistakes people make as writers trying to promote their work, as filmmakers trying to promote their work?
That's a great question. And usually when people ask this, they're like, what's the email I should send? Or like they go straight for like, give me the template. And it's like, actually, the biggest thing is your mindset. The biggest fundamental difference is we have to shift our mindset away to a more entrepreneurial mindset for our career and also a marketer's mindset. And basically what I mean is if I ask most filmmakers, I do this in like I teach this in film schools. I've taught this to agencies, client lists as well. And it's great to do this in person because I can actually engage with the audience and ask them. But usually when I ask them what their target audience is, they say like it's the people who go to the cinema or people who watch at home. I'm like, actually, no, that's not who your audience is. Your audience are producers, development executives, agents, managers, directors. You're actually thinking of the wrong audience. Like what you're looking for is to sell your work in a more business to business capacity. We're a B2B industry and nobody's ever thought of it that way. And I know probably listeners are probably going to be like, ew, marketing out. But it's really important to get that mindset right because you're communicating the wrong thing if you're talking about the end user. That's their audience. The audience that you're talking about is their audience, but that's not your audience yet.
And what you're saying is marketing, right? But sort of what I'm hearing now, and it'd probably make people cringe more, is sales, like as much as marketing, where I think maybe marketing is the general work that you do to get people to the point of sale. You know, it's
Hmm.
like you kind of funnel people down, you know, you kind of like have the outreach of like the general branding so people are aware of your brand, then you kind of like get them engaged with your social media content and your platform online, and then down to the bottom of the funnel, which is the pitch. And it's really like you have to be skilled at each like layer of that to get people to the point of sale. So it's like marketing is nothing if not a tool for sales.
Yeah, and that's right. And
Yeah.
that's the fun. That's actually the philosophy of marketing. If you take the HubSpot approach, HubSpot is a CRM inbound system. It's a platform, and they've got the funnel, and the funnel is a marketing inbound funnel with subscriber at the top, then lead, then marketing qualified, then sales qualified, and eventually customer. And what you do then is you're trying to introduce the audience into the top of the funnel with topics that are resonant with them. So you want to cover what their problem is. And what you want to do is push them down the funnel until they start inquiring about you as a solution to the problem. And only once they pass the sales qualified do, and this is in business terms, then you hand them to sales. So marketing handles the funnel up until sales qualified, because as the name says, it means that they're now qualified to speak to a salesman about actually becoming a customer. So yeah, you're absolutely right. But it is the other parts are what I would refer to as marketing. And it's about having that mindset. It's the mindset shift. So what I would notice a lot of times, and this happened naturally and organically by talking to screenwriters, and then I developed the course and the presentations and the webinar slides because of this. But it would be, I would meet a lot of people and they would put the focus on themselves. I want this. I want that. Can you read my script? And it was very much a can you help me self-focused communication. But if you actually looked at B2B strategies, business to business marketing strategies, there's no industry in the world that focuses on my need before the other businesses need. So what I usually encourage is shift your mindset into actually focusing on what the need of your target audience is and how can you translate your want into their need. So what is their need? How can you communicate that you, with your skill set, with your service, let's say, as a writer, fulfill their objective, or with your project, or dare I say product, with the project that you have. Now, you have the same end goal you want. How you communicate that would resonate better if it's about them, not about you. So that's fundamentally the biggest thing. I couldn't even teach anything about marketing if you don't have that point across, that you can't, you have to stop making it about yourself and your want and hoping that they solve your problem. You should try to solve their problem.
That's so interesting because I think one of the things, and you'll hear it all the time, it's like writers might go, I hate networking because it feels so salesy. And I was like, actually, if you think about it in that abstract term, and even people going, "Ugh, you have to talk about your project, but you don't feel comfortable." I was like, actually, if you remove ego from it entirely and going, yeah, you provide a service. I mean, are you good at the service that you provide? Yes. I mean, I think it's probably the reason that we're so resistant to it as creatives and writers is that there is so much ego tied up in projects and work. And if you detach that completely and go, okay, the end goal is to create something, and the way to get it is to have people know your ability, and the way to people have people know your ability to deliver that job is yeah like is that like create that branding awareness for yourself. And it sounds kind of clinical, but actually if it's not you going I am amazing, but actually yeah, this is the thing that I can provide. That it does, it takes it away from the ego and it being about you and more so about like, this is the work that I can do and I want to do. And it is about the work, which is much easier, like to wrap your head around without getting squirmish. Because I think, especially even as Irish people, like that notion of you having notions and being too big for your boots sort of is always there. That tall poppy syndrome. And actually, if you can kind of detach your own like perception of self away from that work, which is sort of what you're talking about. Is that right?
Well, I don't even think like I think one of the nicest things I can highlight to people when it comes to actually networking, especially like if you're introducing yourself for the first time, and I totally get it. Like there's lots of people who aren't extroverts, a lot of people who hate the shameless feeling of it. My response is, who says you have to talk about yourself? Who says you have to even talk? Like people like to talk. Why don't you be the one who listens? I've learned that myself in festivals. And look, you can tell I'm a talkative person, but a lot of times when I go in these environments, I actually look at it more as an information gathering moment where I'm actually trying to cultivate information about this individual in a nice, transparent way. Like I actually am just interested in who they are, what their interests are, things like this. But I don't even have to talk about my project. Like I don't even think that's even needed. I think, again, this is the confidence and the experience once you get into it to go, this shouldn't be the only time I speak to this person. So why am I hustling them right now? I have 2 minutes. It's going to be really difficult in these 2 minutes to shoehorn my project in. So why don't I sell myself as an actual stable, like professional person and then learn about that person and get their contact details. And then I'll follow up with them about a topic that they're interested in because my goal is to develop a relationship with them. My goal isn't to sell a project. That can be the end result of a cultivated ongoing relationship. And again, what I've learned from my own experience is the people who I've developed previous relationships with and they read my work, they usually ended up liking my work compared to people who don't know me. And then they end up being, and this is a note I have on feedback. Sometimes you have to be very cautious of feedback because you've inspired somebody you don't know to have a new similar idea, and then they try to push their new idea on you rather than help you make your idea better. And if you haven't actually made that relationship with them, even if framed the context of what your project is, then you're going to meet those people who go, oh, I know, this should be different, but similar. And when it becomes that, then I'm engaged. And then you end up going into this rewrite hell trying to fulfill a project that never was should have went that direction anyway. But my big thing for networking is you don't even need to talk about yourself. In fact, I think you're going to come across much better if you actually talk about them. What are their goals? What are their needs? What are their interests? Do they have something coming up? Do they need help with something? That's where I'd be interested in. How can I help you with your upcoming projects? Like, do you have a certain skill set? Like for me, because I'm in marketing, I can kind of lean into that. Like, is there any kind of promotional assistance that you need for your projects? Usually the answer is yes, like because there's a ton of promotional kit material that people require, and maybe having a professional even look it over or even provide guidance can help. You can find your own version of that. I can't dictate specifically what that would be, but I don't even think you need to come in pre prescribing any of that. Go in with curiosity. Begin with curiosity in the networking, learn the information, and then be open to something that they might find beneficial as a follow-up afterward. Because you'll actually get a quicker response going, hey, you were mentioning that you're a big fan of silent films. I just found this podcast about silent films. I thought of you. I thought it'd be interesting. Usually, when you have that approach, they get back to you quickly saying, thank you so much. It was lovely meeting you too. And then you want to find a way to engage with them again if they haven't given you any kind of prompt. But that's the relationship building part that I think is sorely missing in an industry. And instead, we just focus too much on that quick win. Maybe this time, if I demand their help with 1 minute of introduction, it'll work. And for some reason, it just doesn't work. It's funny it works that way.
And what social media platforms, I mean, now with Meta doing everything like that, that would you recommend people be on and to connect? Because, like, okay, you meet that person, like, email sometimes is a terrible way. Like, I mean, if you're a producer being on a set, you know, like you're going to get like a million emails. You're probably not going to respond to each individual request. What would be the best way that you would recommend? I'm a screenwriter. I'm not tech savvy. I want to get out there. I'm going to build my connections and meet people and grow that network. Where would be the places that I should be?
Well, I think it's actually kind of the wrong question of where. I would recommend that you kind of focus your time to like really nail one social media platform or maybe two rather than try to spread yourself too thin across them all. But I would even say that social media isn't actually where you're going to find the success. That would be if you wanted to be a thought leader in the industry, let's say. So I have a YouTube channel called Writing Chops where I share a lot of these tips and tricks myself. And that's where I've put a lot of my time when it comes to social media is on the YouTube channel.
And we'll have that link in the bio as well. So if anyone is interested in following that.
Thank you very much. But that's where I put my time. So yeah, I could spread myself way too thin and try to like master Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. I was like, look, if I can just really get this one up and running, and it works. So now I have 1,600 subscribers, a couple of big hit videos, and like it works. But that actually isn't built to directly get me connected to producers. It's to help me kind of, well, specifically help people in the industry. But then the byproduct of that is it helps me introduce myself to other people by like adjacent to it. So I don't even think social media is really going to be the direct approach to it. I think email is like the networking, the in person as much as possible, and the email follow-ups. That's actually where we want to be. And if you actually look at the difference between B2C marketing and B2B, most B2B is based on email. Now, I will say if you want some tips and tricks for social media, I'd actually recommend a book called Show Your Work by Austin Clone. I've actually, if you go to writingchops.io, my site, on the blog, I've actually written a summary of this book. I recommend reading the whole thing, but I've written a summary because I thought it was so impactful. And it targets people who don't like shamelessly selling. So what you do instead is you document your progress. So if you were, let's say, going to make a film about competitive eating, so your characters are competitive eaters, things like this, instead of just quietly working on this alone in the dark until you have this script ready, why don't you document your process of research in competitive eating? Why don't you document like your interviews with it and like really dive into it? And then even just once a day or even a couple times a week, you just kind of put up a little progress report. Because then if you've started developing relationships with producers or decision makers or potential collaborators, you're reminding them of that you exist because social media is beneficial for that. You're also showing them where your interest is and you're being very targeted with what your topic is. So most likely they're not going to buy your script on competitive eating, but if they're looking for something that's maybe a sports oriented script or a comedy or something that's similar, they're probably going to think of you. So I think that's where the real benefit of social media comes from. If your end goal was to become a either a hired screenwriter or to sell your work. And it's just to document your progress. And that book, I think, is so unique and inspiring for that approach to it. And it's kind of one of the ethos that I put into, but I have it more from the email perspective because that's where I think we really will find the opportunities. But they have to come from like real transparent relationships. They can't just come from shotgunning cold emails. I mean, it can work, but most likely it won't. You'll after 100 emails, you might get one good response from it.
As for writers, if they had one takeaway from your expertise, if they took one thing, what would be the thing that you that maybe people don't necessarily think about that, can really help them?
So we spend so much time working on screenplays, rewriting them, all this stuff, but we spend very little time practically addressing the needs of our career. And so I kind of have this ethos that success comes from small steps taken often, which is why I developed this kind of initiative where I recommend that people send out one email every single day. One email a day, but that email has to be dedicated to focusing on benefiting your career. But you don't do it focusing on your career. You focus it on trying to add value to other people in your life. So you don't have to always target producers either. You can spend like for a week's run, you could send out an email to a screenwriter and say, hey, could you read my log line? Send me yours and I'll read yours. So you've got this exchange program that adds value to them. The next day, send an email to an actor. Why don't we meet up? I want to show you a script I have. Maybe I can get your perspective on it, or maybe we can talk about collaborating on one of your projects. You can send an email to a screenwriting publishing company, maybe an online platform, and propose that you write a guest article on a topic of your choice. But every single day, you're sending one email that's focused on your career. This is something you can do 5 minutes a day. I recommend you do this. You actually cultivate what the list is on the Sunday in advance, so you don't have to sit there every day and go, what am I going to do today? Because that actually can be very frustrating and fatiguing. So just make that decision in advance. And I actually will give you a freebie if somebody replies to you and you reply back, that counts as one of your emails a day. What you'll notice is when you start that program, you're going to be sending more than one email a day when it comes to replies, and you're going to see that your network will grow, your opportunities will grow. But try as much as possible to showcase the value that you can bring to others rather than the self-serving nature of it. So if you were actually to dedicate yourself to one email a day with an added value approach, I think you're going to see a huge difference in your career, and it doesn't really affect your day-to-day work. It's not going to stop you from writing a page or two a day or whatever your target is. It's just going to help you focus on a sustainable way to invest in your career as you continuously explore the creative side of it.
That is absolutely brilliant. So thank you so much for chatting. There's so much to kind of think about and process there. But thank you so much for chatting with us.
Oh, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
So make sure to check out writingchops.io for more info and check out Writing Chops on YouTube for more screenwriting tips, strategies, and guidance.